just to try and figure out, just to say who I am. And this was when I did a presentation actually for an international group that I was working with. So if you go to the next slide, I'm generally happy talking as a doctor. So I run an IVF clinic, and standing up and talking about sperm and eggs is my go-to, and I'm very happy with that. But photography is my other passion, and I would say I'm probably equally a creative along with being a doctor in my life. But it's not something that I stand up and talk about a great deal. But actually, I'm really grateful for this opportunity, because how often is it that we actually show our photographs and talk about them? So tonight for me is actually very exciting. I wasn't quite sure which images to show, so what I'm going to do is talk about somewhere I've been recently. Next slide. Ever since I started, and apart from being a doctor and a photographer and a creative, I just wanted to shout out to TTPS as well. We've been here around 10 years now, and actually, Rachel, apologies. That is you at the top right. That was our first meeting. And I think if I'm right, that was back in 2014, September 2014 at Abigail's studio.
Yes, I was like on the membership list, and Rachel and Kathy are number 1 and number 2.
Yeah, we were number 1. Number 1 and number 2. So the top right picture is actually our first ever TTPS evening event where James was showing some of his pictures. And I've been on the committee on and off during the years. Actually, Chad, you were incorrect. I don't think I've ever been president, but thank you for giving me that title in the bio. I don't believe I ever was. So TTPS is close to my heart, and just talking about photography and promoting photography in Trinidad and Tobago is something that's important to me. I also do some work with a women's shelter, and the reason that this is important is because this is where I went to do some photography at the end of last year to really push myself out of my comfort zone with photography. And so as a doctor in Trinidad and Tobago, I run a women's clinic at the shelter, which Anna knows a great deal about. It's for women who are in difficult situations, and they go to the shelter in Port of Spain. So running a clinic there and seeing how it works is very interesting. And there's a group that I've been watching on the internet and wanting to go and visit for a long time. They're an NGO that works in Jodhpur in India, and they also run a series of domestic shelters. And there's a photography group that runs courses there, Photographers Without Borders. And that's where I went in October last year. What kind of pictures do I take? Before I was putting together this talk, I was trying to think, well, what pictures do I like? Why did I want to go to Jodhpur and take pictures and work for the NGO and work in the shelter? And I realized ever since I was 8 and I did my first photography workshop, I've always taken pictures of people or animals. I love carnival, but mainly the more traditional characters. I love street scenes. When we go on holiday, I love to go to markets and take pictures of people working. And I realize that's what I really love. Next picture. I don't do a lot with my images. You sometimes post them on social media. I have a lot of images over the years, having lived in Trinidad for 20 years. Next image. And you do begin, and I take animals as well. I kind of think of animals as people. So this was a lizard by my front door, an iguana by my front door. And next one is my favorite tree frog that got into our house by mistake. So this is on our steps in our house. Next picture. I love street photography as well. But I wanted to see, in a way, how good are my images? I think we often all think of that when we're taking photographs. How do you know how good your images are? People say they like our work, but am I really doing well enough with my photography? Where can I take it? And I felt like I wanted to kind of go to the next level and do something a little bit deeper. Next image. And again, so this is just some street images. This is Blue Devils, which I've been to for many years up in Paramin. One of my favorite images coming next. And what I realized looking at these images is I don't really know these people. I don't know why this person has a chicken foot in their mouth. I know that they're a devil in the Blue Devils parade, but I would really like to take some of these images and get better. And that's actually what I think I did when I was in India. Next image. And this is another one. This is in Morocco. This is street photography in Morocco. I love going to markets and taking pictures of people. So I went off to India, and I think these images, why do I take images? Why do we all take images? Well, they make me feel an emotion. They make me, I don't know, when you take photographs, you go into a different zone. You really get involved. You see images, you see color, and they kind of stir emotions in you. I guess that's why I take photographs. So there's a group called Photographers Without Borders. I've been part of their webinars and part of their groups watching. They do documentary style photography. They're ethical storytelling, street photography, people photography, but they generally are working to promote something in the environment or so they'll go to, recently one of the photographers did saving orangutans in Sumatra, or Native Americans in Canada trying to stop the oil and gas industry, gentlemen here, from ruining the environment, or indigenous people and some of their fights. And they were running, in the last 5 years, they've run a workshop in Jodhpur, and it works in a charity in Jodhpur, and you live there, and they teach you storytelling, they teach you photography, portrait, low light. So that's where I went. And I've been watching them for years, and these are the people I was with. So it's called the Sambhali Trust. It's in Jodhpur, which is kind of northeastern India. I don't know if anyone been to Jodhpur? You been to Jodhpur? And we went, and you live in the Sambhali Trust. They have a small guest house, and you live there, and it's a group of photographers. It was female only because you're working in the domestic shelters that they have, and they run 9 around Jodhpur and 1 in a village in North India. And basically, we would get up every morning. They have a boarding house for 70 girls that are being taken out of their environment to try and avoid child marriages. So there's a children's home right next to us. So we'd get up in the morning early, have our coffee, the kids would come over and practice their English, and then we would at about 7:30, 8 a.m. start with photography workshops. We learned about different ways of taking portraits in low light. And another day we would do the ethics of street photography. Another day we do settings on your camera to do each day you do something different. And then you'd be sent off into a minivan with one of the workers from the Sambhali Trust, and you would end up in a school or in a shelter or going to some government building where they're trying to advocate for money or for change. And so you'd basically be put somewhere for the day, and you'd be given an assignment. Bring back 3 rim light portrait photographs. Do 3 Rembrandt photographs. Go and find a story and bring us back 10 images and make the story good. So they were pushing you out of your comfort zone. And each evening we'd have dinner with all of the people that live in the Sambhali Trust. And then we'd have to present our images, and we'd critique each other until late at night, and then you'd get up and work out again what you were doing for the next day. And the end of your 10 days, 12 days there, you had to produce your story. And they had to be really good images, but a story with impact, and then they would choose some of them to be published. And I'll show you when I found my story, because I didn't find my story straight away. These are some of the people that the Sambhali Trust helps. They're actually guys. In India, a lot of people who are gay cannot live openly as gay males, so they actually live as females. In fact, in India, I had no idea about this. A lot of them actually have sex change surgery, even though they're not transgender, but it's easier to live as a transgender woman in India. So I'll show you some of the pictures that I took in the transgender house. And this is the Sambhali Trust. So a lot of what we were doing was listening to people talk. What do you do? What are you doing here? Some of them are volunteers. The guy in the green shirt, that's Govind. He's been running the Sambhali Trust for 20 years. If you're interested in him, his story is on the website. He's a really fascinating guy. The girl sitting down, that's Lulu. She was my roommate. So you're a little bit out of your comfort zone. You're sharing rooms. You're sleeping on really threadbare mattresses on the ground. You're eating the local food. Govind they were so hospitable. That's Danny. She's the leader of the workshop. So she's a National Geographic photographer, but she's really, like Lisa was saying, they've moved off into their own things. She actually is the founder of Photographers Without Borders. And she's well known for doing a lot of environmental work, sustainable work. When I first started listening to her, she's got a very different view on things than I have. And we're recording this, so I'll be gentle about what I'm saying. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how she taught us. And this is where we lived. It's a gorgeous little building down a side street in Jodhpur. And it's basically, it's the NGO, it's the shop that makes money, it's the boarding house with 70 girls, it's Govind's home. It's where we all lived on top of each other. Every afternoon in that doorway, a troop of about 20 LGBT guys would come in because it's their safe zone. That's where I learned to dance, Indian dance, and I haven't shown my family that yet. It's a fascinating place, and every day from there we would move out. This is Govind and his brother and his son and his daughter. We were involved in everything, so there was a lot of prayers going on. There was a Hindu festival going on at the time, and I can't remember the name of it. I don't know, Lisa, if you know it. It's the one with all the big, they make all the big, like Guy Fawkes dummies, and they burn them.
Oh, that's...
It's not... It was October time, yeah. And you'd go along the roads and there'd be all these huge effigies made out of colored cardboard, and they'd be like the size of this studio. And then very scarily, just towards the end of when we were here, they'd fill them with fireworks and set them on fire. And then you'd be running in the streets to avoid the fireworks. So that was quite something.
And you can see that here.
They do that here?
Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
Where do you...
The guy who does fabulous ones, they're like 75 foot high.
So we took pictures. And to begin with, we went to the streets of Jodhpur. This is some of the photographers I was with. Danny, Tanika is the South African just behind her. And then you can see a couple in the background. So I got to know the women I was with very well. We all lived together. Hi, guys. And we went to the fort to try and take some street photography and come back and then be critiqued on it. We went into the streets of Jodhpur. Jodhpur is a blue city. We went into the old area. And everywhere we went, we had a translator with us, which is something that's really important. And I realized I've never done that when I've traveled before. And we were quite nervous to begin with. You didn't go up and talk to people. So some of my images from Jodhpur when we're going around the old city, this is Lulu, Pravina, Danny down there. That's Virendra, who was one of our translators. So we wandered through the old town. We began to feel our way in India. You got used to it. And you began to get used to talking to people through an interpreter. And I also realized, as did Lulu, that we had to wear sunglasses because blue eyes is incredibly unusual in India. And so everywhere Lulu and I went, everybody wanted selfies. It's the weirdest thing. I'm the photographer there, but everywhere we went, we had to pose for photographs, which got kind of awkward after a while, and I understand what it's like being the subject of someone's photographs. Especially in the fort, the kids with their cell phones, I couldn't get away. You want me to sit down here?
No. You just want to receive it.
Oh, for my beer. Thank you.
So it doesn't get warm.
So we did a lot of portraits. I took my traditional pictures of doors, but again, these images aren't anything special. They're just like what I've been doing before, and we really enjoyed it. We settled in. You're not allowed to use any settings on your camera other than manual, so you'd always have Danny with you during the day, and if she caught you on aperture priority, and you weren't allowed to present those images that evening. So that was really good, to be forced into thinking about the light, to be forced into using your brain to put on the settings that you want, to be forced into looking at things and thinking about the color was really good. And Jodhpur is beautiful. Everywhere you look, there is a picture to take. And again, I like these pictures, but again, they're just snaps. They're not really what I wanted to be doing. As we moved on in the group and did more work, Danny would talk more about how we should take pictures. So we weren't allowed to say, take pictures. She's got some very clear guidelines about the way we should behave as photographers. And she's an interesting person. She's half Pakistani, half Canadian, looks very Indian, blends in very much. But her point to us was, you are white. You are there with a camera. It's very difficult for people to say no to you if they don't want a picture taken. And you have to learn not to be a colonial, which was a very interesting way to look at things. She said, you cannot talk about taking pictures. You should be talking about making images. You shouldn't be talking about shooting pictures. You should be talking, you shouldn't be using guns. You shouldn't be taking things. You shouldn't be in people's faces when they don't want. You've got to be very intuitive. And a lot of the women in India, particularly, unfortunately, the ones I wanted to take pictures of, the pregnant women, because that was what I wanted my story to be, they just didn't want their pictures taken. So you had to be very respectful. And again, a lot of my images you'll see are street scenes, again, where the person isn't really involved in letting you take that image. So it's a nice scene, it's an Indian scene. I think the guy with the yellow hat is just so cool. But it was a scene that we walked through and we didn't stop and take time. So again, not really. So we present these images at night and she would, we'd be critiqued. Okay, well, who are these people? What are you trying to say with this image? It's very nice. The light is nice. But how are you going to use this? How does it help anyone? And this was in the fort. So we went to, there's a huge fort up in Jodhpur, and the name escapes me. It was incredible. They had all these guys with these amazing turbans. There were lots of tourists there. I loved the women that were cleaning, and they had purple saris around their heads. They're untouchables. They wouldn't let you, but I took some pictures of them. I think the next one is a picture of one of them. And this is just the fort in Jodhpur. And actually, as the sun went down, you can see the old town in the back. It's got the blue on it. I really wanted to take some pictures. So we had to look at light. We had to present this. So this was an evening where we had to present using light in different ways to highlight something in your image. I found an untouchable woman that I really wanted to take pictures of. Next one. This is the lady that I loved. She was going around and cleaning the floor with a broom. The colors were lovely. The light was going down. But every time she came near me, she wouldn't let me take a picture. She said it was okay as she backed off, but she didn't want anything nearer. So again, nice pictures, but I don't know who that is. It's a nice picture for a tourist that's gone there, but again, it doesn't say very much. And so when I went back in that evening to present that picture, I don't really have a story. I just have a nice image, again, nothing that's really going to take you deeper. I really like this guy. So the guys that at the fort were the keepers of the fort, and they were making all the tourists stay in line, had these beautiful orange turbans. They were very proud. This is Danny posing for us. We were practicing doing portraits, and I just noticed he was standing behind her. He was standing beside her laughing. They're really interesting guys, and again, they let you take pictures. They're very used to having their pictures taken, but I didn't spend the time talking to him. I did get his name at the time, so I could present this image later on that evening. But I couldn't really say too much. I don't know why he's wearing a yellow sash. I don't know why he's wearing an orange turban. And we were just practicing portraits. I like doing different things. So again, we were told to use light in different ways to produce our images. This is one looking through in the palace. At the kids playing in the courtyard. Actually, I was hiding inside because too many people wanted to take pictures of me. So I was running away from a troop of 12-year-old boys who were trying to take my selfie like 12 times. And again, we presented a lot of these images, but the point was there's nothing publishable here again. You could use this as a nice image, but what's your story? Along the way, though, we were beginning to learn about the different caste system. We were beginning to see how people interact in India, how we could learn to talk to people. So the first few days in the old town, in the fort, going to the markets, which I love, I realized what they were doing was they were helping sensitize us, because they knew our images at the beginning weren't going to be publishable. They weren't going to really be deep, and you had to kind of settle in India. I've never been to India before. I was expecting chaos and smells, and actually it was beautiful and artistic. But it did take a long time to settle into feeling comfortable. So after a couple of days, you have to think about your perspective. And what I realized we need to do is dig deeper. So if you want to get images that take you a little step further in your work, you have to think about yourself. You have to dig deeper to ask, why am I even taking these images? Why do these images interest me? you have to think very much about your lighting and your settings and your creativity. How do you want to show things in the lighting? We had to listen a lot as well. And what we began to do was talk to people a lot more and actually do a lot of listening. And I realized after taking maybe 1,000 shots in the first 3 days, for a couple of days I actually stopped taking images. Next one. And then I was sent to my first assignment. And this was one, okay, Kathy, you and Lulu are being sent to this school. You've got 4 hours in this school, and you have to come back with a story. So do not come back and tell us you haven't spoken to anybody. Oh, and by the way, there's no translator for you today. You're being dropped off into the Muslim section of Jodhpur. Could you please cover your eyes and your hair? Good luck. I think some of them in there speak English. Come back, each of you, with a story. So the Sambhali Trust, the way they look after the women in the local communities that are suffering with a lot of issues, domestic issues, and there's a lot of alcoholism, a lot of violence against women, women generally aren't educated. The way they help is they go into the community and they find a building in the community that they can use for the women, and they set up what they call an empowerment house. And it's a really different way of running a domestic shelter, because you're not bringing anybody out of their home and sticking them somewhere private where they can't be found. You're using the women in the community that are quite powerful and are really entrenched in the community. They're figuring out the women that are dealing with really difficult situations, abusive husbands, alcoholic husbands, sexual abuse. And they're getting those women to come in the mornings to these empowerment houses where they help them and where there is a psychologist, but much more than that, where they teach them reading and writing and English. And English elevates them above their husbands. It gives them a bit of standing. And I didn't understand it until I met someone called Goody, who you're going to meet. It teaches them a skill. So the empowerment houses teach them sewing. And when they graduate, if they stick and keep coming for a year, at the end they get a sewing machine and the raw materials to run a business. And then a lot of the women do well, so they come back with microfinancing loans and they share some of their money with some of the other women that are coming through. So, for example, anyway, I'll tell you a bit more when we get to Satrawa village. So that's what the empowerment house is in the morning. It also teaches the ladies exercise, which is dance and self-defense. It's basically how to kick a guy, hurt a guy, knock off a guy, and get strong. So they call it dancing, Indian dancing, but it's not. So that's in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, the empowerment house becomes a school, because a lot of the girls in the community are not educated, and they come from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to these centers. So this is the Abaya Empowerment Center. And this was the photo that was chosen as the best one of the bunch for that evening's critique. And I really like this teacher. So it's basically a little upstairs room open to the environment, pretty much the size of where we are here, and it's divided off into 3 classrooms. So you've got the kindergarten, the next stage up, and then the advanced. And they're pretty much all just sitting on the floor and working. If it rains, they all run under one little awning. But the kids there are learning how to read and write in English and Hindi. So the girls come out well educated. And they allow the boys to come in as well. So the boys are going to school, but they're home in the community in the afternoons, and they like the boys to come if they want, because it teaches them that girls can learn too, and it teaches them respect, and they're not allowed to be disrespectful at all. So this is a Baya school, and my story was all about the teacher, and I did some black and white images of them learning their letters. We basically sat on the floor. We didn't speak much English. I got used to taking pictures on my cell phone and getting the kids to write their name with the edit pen on my phone, so I would remember who was who. And most of the girls are between the ages of about 7 to 10. This is a lovely teacher. Her name has escaped me. She brings her son in. She works in the private sector. She also works in a Baya school every afternoon because she was helped by one of the empowerment centers and is now much more advanced. She's a teacher and she's bringing up her son. So we went around, we took pictures, and the NGOs use this. They use it on their website. Much more than that, they use it to get funding. They need a lot of NGO funding because they run 9 empowerment centers, but they also run a boarding house to get girls out of childhood marriage all around Rajasthan. They also run workshops. They have a full-time counselor, a telephone line for domestic abuse. They go into schools now, and they have a program for no touch. So it's a sex abuse prevention, and it runs in the 5 to 8-year-old age group. It's something, and it teaches the kids pictures, and you can't touch me here, and if he touches me here, it's called No Touch, and it was quite inspiring. It's something I think would do really well here. But also we wanted to show in this school that it's a mixture of Muslim and Hindu. So Jodhpur is primarily Hindu, but this was the very poor Muslim area, but the girls were learning alongside each other with no issues. Next picture. And so we were just showing how the school does reading and writing. Next image. And taking pictures really to show, so when we were there, of course, there was one light, one AC unit in the classroom with a roof, and of course it went. So again, it's about showing, the NGO wants to show how the kids really concentrate, how they work hard, but how there's very little around them so that they can get more funding to be able to provide more schools. So our images are trying to show the pride that the kids have, how well they work, but also the conditions that they're working in. And I was pleased with those images. I felt like, okay, I'm taking a step. This is where I wanted to be going. So our next assignment, we'd been there about 6 days at that point. The next assignment is, what is your story going to be? Because at the end of your time here, you're all going to have to stand up in front of the NGO, everyone who works here, and present a story that you have found that is meaningful to you and has really good images. So that was quite difficult. We'd been around all sorts of different places. So I'd been in the empowerment centers to see women. Next one. I'd been in I went to the LGBT guys. So as I said in the afternoons, if you're male, gay in India, you generally can't live as a gay with the people that you're with. So they would come here, they ran an afternoon group. And they put up in that they wanted to be happy and free. They loved dancing. So this was a time when we all had our hands painted. They would dress up in saris, because a lot of them loved to dress, to cross-dress. And the dancing and the music was so much fun. None of these images really made it. And I thought, I think I would love to do my assignment, my story about what it's like to be LGBT in India. But I just couldn't find something that spoke to me. The guys were all lovely. We took images. But and they were showing us all sorts of things. They didn't want us to show their face. So they were all hiding in a way. And again, that was important. You can't really show their images because their family might recognize them. We went into the transgender house. So in Jodhpur Old Town, the guys that are living as women are actually revered. I didn't realize quite how much until we were walking along the street and we saw 3 of the guys we'd met in here in their full saris, and people were really respectful to them. So there's a transgender house. We went to meet them with Govind. The lady in red is in charge of the house. I took some portraits there, and I wondered if maybe my story might be there, but I didn't really gel. So these are all guys living as women with the blessings of their family. They're out, they're open, they're walking in the streets, and they're respected. They loved having us there. She's one of the eldest. She's 70. She's the mother of the one that was before in the photo. And I love black and white photography, but again, it didn't speak to me as what I wanted to be my assignment. So after we'd finished in Jodhpur, we actually went up to Satrawa village, which is where Govind is from. It's in the north of Rajasthan. It's about a 2-hour drive out of Jodhpur. And we all thought we were going there for like a little break, to a little spa area. But actually, again, we were thrown into, this is what you're going to do. You're going to the village. You're going to the camel man to watch and see what they do. So again, you were basically going to places where people worked and where the NGO was trying to get a foothold or talk to people. So Satrawa village was actually where I really found what I wanted to take pictures of. This is Satrawa. It's nothing special. It's very dusty. It's quite impoverished. There's very little work really in terms of young guys. Pretty much all the young people are looking to leave. They have some local English to one of the maids in his house who's an untouchable. And you're not supposed to do that in his caste. And he said he taught her English one day. The next day he went to teach her English and there were 17 girls there. And he began to realize, well, you know, while we're figuring out what we want to do, while I'm working out how I support my mother, maybe I just teach English. And he's progressed from there to having this NGO that runs empowerment houses. So he's really unusual in terms of an Indian man. And this is his empowerment, his first empowerment center in Satrawa. So he was up there while we were there and we met him. We spent a lot of time walking around Satrawa, listening. So a lot of the women will come in and talk to him. They'll talk about their issues. He was up there really to see how things were going, to work at a few issues with the community. They do a lot of work with the community, and the community really accepts the Empowerment Center. What you find is that he's talking to one of the NGO workers from Sambhali, and she's talking about problems with one of the husbands that is beating up his wife very badly and won't let her come to the Empowerment Center. And they're working out, because what they will do is send one of the older women from the Empowerment Center who's been there 20 years into the family to shame the husband that's drunk into letting the woman come back to the Empowerment Center. And that's how they work with the community. They don't believe in taking the woman out, like I said. They believe in the community helping sort out the problem and using some of the older women to work in the families. And it seems to work quite well. Next slide. And we took pictures with them teaching the sewing. The lady in the pink where you can see the face, I can't remember her name, but she runs the Empowerment Center. She's amazing. We followed her to go and see her talking to a couple of difficult husbands. And it's wonderful to watch the way she can really sort out a lot of the issues in the community. My job that day, though, was to take some pictures of the sewing and the work that was going on in the Empowerment Center for the NGO. And we're supposed to be finding our story. So we have our translator with us, Virendra and Bhumi, two of the guys that work with Govind. And you're taking pictures of the girls and you're talking to them with your translator, trying to find something that's going to be your story. Next slide. Oh, and at night we had folk music. We did night photography. We went out to the desert. We did a lot of work with portraits in the desert and night photography. None of those images I'm going to show you, none of them came out particularly well. It's a shame Kazim's not here. My night photography needs a lot of work. I got a lot of women coming up to me, showing me babies. Everyone would let me take pictures of babies, which wasn't what I wanted. And as I said, there was always beautiful saris to take pictures of. I think the next one. And a lot of the older women were very happy to have pictures taken. The younger women often wouldn't. They'd pull their saris down and they'd say no. And it was, you began to talk a bit more. Next image. And then I met Deva Ram. He's in a tiny little cabin. He sells ceramics. And he's right as you come into Satrawa village. And I absolutely loved his orange turban. So I went and took some pictures of him. Next. He was hilarious. But in these images, you see that there's a final image that I took of him. It's, I think, one of the images I'm most proud of. So in these images, we'd been chatting. I don't think I had a translator with me at the time, and I took some images because I found him so interesting. But again, I didn't know his name when I went back to present these images that evening. And this is Goody. So this is my story. So as I was walking around the village, the lady in the front in the sari came and met us. And as usual, we were being dive-bombed by kids. And this is me with Danny and Lulu and Pravina and Holly. So and Sophie. So we were out taking pictures. And the kids were really interested in us. But Goody is the person that I began to talk to. And I didn't really talk to her much here, but I did later on because she came to the Empowerment Center the next day. So this is all about getting the narrative right, using your images to tell a story that's true and really has some sort of impact. So Goody came into the Empowerment Center the next day, and I started taking pictures of her. She was very happy. She has some English, and it turns out she came to the Empowerment Center from the age of 8 to 18. And she wasn't saying a lot about it, but Govind took me to one side and said she fought so hard to come here. She wasn't allowed to come. She was supposed to be married at 10, And from 8, she was outside the empowerment center every day, begging her family to let her come in. She would come every day and cry and get on until finally they let her come in. And at 12, they said she had to go and be married. And she managed to get Govind to go and negotiate with her family to allow her to stay at the empowerment center until she was 18. And then she had to go off and get married, by which she speaks very good English. She can read and write in English. She has math and Hindi reading and writing as well. So she came out actually better educated than the man that she was going to. She actually doesn't live in Satrawa anymore. She'd come back, and she's actually at the empowerment center, next image, for her niece. So her niece is also called Bhumi, a bit like one of my translators. Her niece is 12. And I'd met Bhumi actually the day before in the streets, because she grabbed me in the street and taken me to her house, and a lot of the kids did that. Bhumi is about to be married off. She's not allowed to come to the empowerment center. Her younger 2 siblings are her 7-year-old sister, her 10-year-old brother. But she really wants to be educated. She really loves reading and writing, and she really was trying to find a way out of having to go off and get married. And that's what Goody did. She came back from where she was living 2 hours away to really talk to her brother, because her brother is Bhumi's father, but also to come and talk to Govind and said, take her into the Jodhpur house, please. Take her in Jodhpur, take her into the boarding house, and please try and help her. So Bhumi was there trying to get her, Goody was there trying to get her a place. And she began talking about it a lot. And I did my portrait. So that evening we had to do rim light portraits. And Goody was a lovely subject, because she and I got talking a lot, and she began to let me take pictures. And it was really interesting watching her talk. The next one is, so this is the final kind of showdown with Govind, because there wasn't any space. There is not any space in the boarding house. And she's basically begging to get Bhumi into this boarding house, and eventually Govind found a way to find somewhere for her to stay in Jodhpur until they could get her in. And in the boarding house, you live and you eat and you bathe and you go in a safe minibus every day to a private school for girls, so you get educated in Jodhpur. And that's where a lot of the money goes. And Govind finally allowed her to, they found a way to get her out of her family and come across and do that. I took a lot of portraits of Goody, and she knew that I was a fertility doctor. And after a couple of days, she took me aside and she told me actually she'd lost her baby girl at 4 months. And we talked a lot about all the children that die in Satrawa. So only 1 in 10 die before the age of 5. And it made me go off actually. I went off on my own with a translator into Satrawa. Tanika came with me actually. I'd been sent back because if I wanted to take pictures of the ceramicist, Deva Ram, I had to go and talk to him and come back with his name before I was allowed to use any of the images. And anyway, I loved how he looked, and I really wanted to go back and find him. But as we walked around Satrawa, I began to see it in a different way. And I went in and started speaking to some of the doctors that told me, and this is a little boy, a 2-year-old that's been brought in with breathing problems. And the doctor, whose name I've forgotten, really lovely guy, was talking to me. He said, malnutrition, air pollution, and viruses are what kill most of the under 5s. And I began to look a lot more. This mom didn't really want her head shown, but she was very happy for me to take pictures. And I began to look at the pollution and realize they don't have rubbish collection. They don't have any garbage collection at all, so everything's burnt in the streets. There is a lot of building work and dust, and the pollution in the air comes from so many different things. But everywhere in the street, they're burning plastic, they're burning rubbish. And the doctors, I went and talked with 2 other doctors in the village, and they said they think pollution is a huge problem for the adults, but for the children. And they said all the children have asthma. And if they get sick or malnourished, they just don't survive. And that's what happened to Goody's daughter as well. She was malnourished, she got dehydrated, she got a virus, and she died in the middle of the night when she was 4 months old. And Goody hasn't been able to get pregnant since then, so she's also having infertility. So we were talking at a different level, which made me kind of bring my medicine into it. But it made me see things in a different way, and this is where my story began to formulate. We were taken off into different places. We were taken on different trips to see different things outside Satrawa. So this is a guy that makes rugs, and everyone thought that we'd be really interested to go and meet him. He's got a lovely moustache. So our translative renderers like Kathy, Lulu, come, this guy you're going to love. He's just like the pottery guy. He's got this fantastic moustache. Come, you'll love him. And it was okay, but the light wasn't great. I couldn't really get a good picture. He wouldn't really talk to us. He kept making Tanika do the weaving with him. He wanted us to buy rugs. Tanika kept getting her hand stuck in the weaving machine. But we didn't really find any images there. But his wife cooked us lunch. And we ended up not doing what we were supposed to do. We were supposed to be sitting with the men and talking about weaving. We ended up in the kitchen with his wife, who was a really interesting lady. And I found again, once you talk to somebody, you get these images that begin to mean so much more. She had so much to say. She was really interesting. She was cooking chapatis and talking with us. And actually, that's not my favorite image. This is my favorite image. I loved her sari. I loved the colors. It was grays and yellows, the chapati on the fire. There was often a bit of orange in the smoke. She had a lot to say. We sat in there chatting for an hour with her. And they're untouchables. Actually, they're not. They're slightly above untouchables in the ranking of the caste system. And she is not allowed to work. She was basically in the back. She wasn't supposed to come out and talk to us. Her daughter came in, and I got some portraits of her daughter. It's just fascinating. Listening to the problems with the men, the males that are disillusioned in the area and they're finding it difficult to work, the fact that her husband couldn't ever be anything other than a rug maker, the fact that they used to be able to sell their rugs and now they're not able to. It was really interesting listening to her. She was quite angry about some things, and she was really interested to have people that were asking questions. So my images begin to change, and I could see that by the end of this workshop, and that's one of my favorite images. We went to some markets, and I saw this lovely lady in pink. She looked really interesting. That's just a snap, and this is an image that I'm really proud of. So again, after 5 minutes chatting with her, she's 82. She says she doesn't need to be in the market. She just does it for fun because her son and daughter will not talk to her. No one comes to her house. But if she sits in the market and sells some vegetables, she meets people all day. She's such an interesting woman. But the portraits change when somebody knows you. She knows where I'm from, why I'm taking images. And I noticed people begin to look into the camera and show you more of themselves. So I went back to Devaram. So just to finish up, this is Mr. Devaram, the ceramicist. Tamika went first. She had him outside with all of his pots. He had a huge amount of pots. And then I asked the translator to just let him go back in his hut where he was sheltering and where he's happy and where I first met him. I did take a portrait actually outside with the pots, but it wasn't the right light. It's not a portrait that does anything. It's nice. It's got the big pots around and this gorgeous orange turban, but it wasn't what I wanted. So in the end, we went back into his shack where he was sheltering. And we talked a lot. Bumi was my translator, and he's like, Kathy, what do you want to ask? We've been chatting a bit about his pots, and I was like, well, ask him what he thinks about women being educated. And he goes, no, not doing that. So we started with, what's your age? How many kids do you have? Anyway, so his name is Devaram. He's an untouchable. He doesn't read or write, and he didn't go to school. On his arm, he got his name tattooed at a fair when he was about 16, and he's laughing because he says, I can't even read. It wasn't until one of my children could read that I knew what this tattoo actually says. He has 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. They grew up in Satrawa. None of his girls went to school. He got them all married off, and he thinks that's great. So I didn't stop there. I kept asking him more. He's got 12 grandchildren. His boys have all moved into IT and engineering. He's an untouchable. And he said it's caused him a problem because they are supposed to make the pots for him to sell. His wife has got arthritis and can't make the pots. So now actually he has a collective, and he goes around different villages, and the people who make pots he brings together. So although he's an untouchable, he has his own business now, and he's more like a co-op for ceramicists. But he was really proud, and I was asking him, okay, you've got 12 grandchildren, how many girls, how many boys? He goes, before you ask, 6 boys, 6 girls, and yes, all the girls go to school. And he was so proud of it. And it was really interesting to watch where his life has come in 2 generations. And these are the images I'm most proud of. So while we were taking these images, there were 3 little shacks outside that are the local barbers. They're all guys with funky hair, mustaches. They looked about 20. They kept coming around. Like, why is the white woman taking pictures of him? What's Deva got? Come and take pictures of us. And he was just so proud. He was going, gentlemen, Come and learn. Come and see the wisdom. And so we were asking him, why the orange turban, you know? And he goes, I thought it was because there was this festival on. He goes, no, I just like it. And I was asking him about his jewelry. He's got earrings looped over his ears. And he goes, yeah, again, just like them. And he was a fascinating guy. We had a lot of laughs. But these were the images I think that I'm most proud of. I think that's the last one, or there might be one more. Yeah. So that is my journey in storytelling. And if you're interested in reading more about Photographers Without Borders, they have a great website, they do webinars, and they do different courses. So like Lisa went to Mongolia, she inspired me to actually do this. When you were talking about going away and learning from people and pushing your boundaries and being in a different place, it was actually the first time I began to think of it. And I'd wanted to go to Jodhpur for 5 years. Yeah. So if you want any more information about them, they have a great website.
Some National Geographic photographers are not as focused on the make a story, but I've done a bit more with Peter Turnley, and you know he's always said make a picture. You do not take pictures, you do not shoot, no guns. So it's very interesting to see that continue depending on where it is. And I wondered, did they give you a lot of coaching in terms of shooting horizontal versus vertical? Because some photographers again are.
No. They were very much find your style. They're not going to tell you anything, but you have to have images that you're believing in, that you're proud to stand up, and we had to then do this presentation to the whole of the NGO at the end.
Which is always the hardest.
Very, very hard, exactly, yes, yeah. But actually it was the most fun because they love the images. They say that every single person that comes there, they have a lot of volunteers going through, but they say when the photographers come, it's always different. Every image is different, it's never the same. And what you're saying, it's very hard to change your words and how you speak. While I was there, I was always being reminded not to say, I'm going to take an image, I'm going to shoot a picture. It's really hard to make yourself change to make an image. Yeah, I still make the mistake. I'm sure I did on this talk, talking about taking. Mark, be gentle.
Sorry. Yeah, I have two, actually. One is more from a practical level. You took your laptop with you, I presume.
I did.
How much, because obviously this is just a small selection of the photos that you took. How much, how much time did you spend editing going through the photos on an evening, in the evening, or did you have a lot of time to do that? Did you basically try and not take as many photos, but good photos instead of just blow and go? Is one question. And then other question has to do with, I'm noticing in a lot of these images, there seems to be a lot of happiness. Were there any photos or situations where you saw tragedy or tragic moments? I presume there were some. I don't know if you, because of the etiquette in those situations, whether that type of thing was frowned upon, or what kind of guidance would you have with respect to that?
Thank you. In terms of, yes, I had my laptop. We often lost electricity, and I actually took a solar charger with me. There wasn't time to do much other than rush home, whiz through your images and find the 10 you were presenting that night and very quickly edit them. I think I took 3,000 images on the whole trip, and I honestly haven't been through them all yet. It's very sobering to have to choose images quickly. And sometimes you had to present without editing because the electricity had gone, and I couldn't get my laptop charged. So I did take a lot of images, but that was because I was on manual setting and I'm not hugely confident. So I'd set my aperture according to what I wanted, and then I'd change the shutter speed and the speed to try and get the light that I want, because I never use flash. I didn't have a flash with me, and I like low light photography. So it was really challenging and frustrating not to be able to edit for hours, We literally would get home, shower if there was water, run to get food. Then we'd go usually into the boarding house, teach the kids English, help put them to bed, because none of them have their parents with them. And then we would go for our evening critique session and have to be ready to present, and then be ready to be up again the next morning. So no, very little editing.
The other one was about, looking
The
at
ethics.
strategy as opposed to that.
Yeah, Goody was a really interesting one, and actually the image of Goody that has her looking slightly sideways, the color one, we'd just been talking about how her daughter died, and whether she'd ever be able to get a baby again, and that one. And she's very wistful, but she's also, it's interesting as an obstetrician to be able to talk, as a gynecologist to be able to talk to her and try and help her. I'm still trying to find a way to get her some fertility tablets, but there is so much stigma around infertility. She won't let me post them to Govind, so she can't get a baby, she's got issues. So this picture I wasn't sure if I should take, and she's like, no, you needed to take some more portraits for tonight. And this is one of the ones I used in the story, because she's looking away, she's thinking, but the ethics is that I know she's okay with this. I've told her I'm writing a story. I sent it to her. She's seen it. I've passed all the pictures by her. She's on WhatsApp. So I know that what I'm doing is okay. Yeah, and you have to be just empathetic and listen, and you know when the right time is okay, and you know when you really have overstepped a boundary and you should move back, I think. It's a difficult one. I think that comes with maturity. I don't know how you all feel. I mean, I look back, Sarita, we did photo safari in the park in Independence Square, and again I look back at some of the images I took there's a guy there, he's not homeless, but he's got, yes, and again I look at those images and I think I wouldn't ever use those, and it was a little bad of me to be taking images of someone without really knowing him or talking to him. Danny and some of the other photographers, they talk about poverty porn all the time. You're coming in from the UK or America, all you want is your pictures of poor people in the street. And we've got to get away from that. And actually Goody's story was the one that was published in a very washed down, they didn't want to put all the infertility, and then she said she was happy with it. So the website does not have the infertility or the fact her baby died, but they've published it in their magazine, and that has the full story with her blessing.
Hi, Kathy. You spoke a lot about pursuing a story, and I wonder if photographs where you are not able to understand a person's story will still have the same amount of value for you, because certain things, when they're mysterious and you don't know, as the observer, it's more of a spiritual experience when you are left to wonder what the possibilities of the story could have been. What are your thoughts on this?
Do you mean that for the person who's looking at the image rather than giving them all the information, or do you think me as a person not asking too many questions when I take the picture? Yeah. I like writing the story. I think humans are interesting. We had to get a story because the NGO uses them, so we didn't have a choice. And I've never really done that. I've never gone out to create stories around photographs. I've always liked I like this image, it says something, there you go. I think the images of Deva and him laughing and his tattoo, and I wrote that in the website image, I think it just adds to it. I think he's fun, and it was fun, and his story is interesting. So I think the more you know behind the image, the more impactful maybe that image becomes, if what you're telling is truthful and is interesting. What I was really proud of is that we were not supposed to have our words published, because people can't write well and take pictures. And what I was really proud of is that my words were published. So they were edited, and then the editor said, oh no, it's okay, it's Kathy's words. So it's words and images by Kathy Bain, which made me really proud, particularly as a doctor who doesn't have much English or essay writing. So yeah, it's nice to see your words in print as well.
So would you do it again? And if so, what do you think you would do? Where would you like to go to expand your storytelling?
This made me realize there's so much you can do at home. I mean, I think Lisa's probably, I suddenly opened my eyes to, I remember stopping in, what are the work with Chloe? We stopped off in the workshop where they used to make the shoes and the belts. as you come down by. Yes, I remember going in there with you when you were 12 and we took some pictures. And there's so much just literally there in front of you. So it's inspired me to try and make some time in my life to do this because I love it. And it's also a really great way, I think, to show things that are in your local community. I would love to go away again. If I can find the time and the money to go away again. They have some in going to indigenous communities in Colombia. I think I'd like to do that. The more, they've got some environmental ones to do with whales, but I think you have to be in a cold environment and a lot of water. I'm not sure I could sit in a kayak. Sitting in a school, I didn't mind the heat. Jodhpur was brutal, but that didn't bother me. But sitting in a cold kayak for 2 weeks, not sure. But I'd love to do it again. And actually, we're supposed, at the end of this, we were also supposed to develop a website because you can get assignments off of this. So some of the photographers there will then be, you can get assignments through Photographers Without Borders. I never actually did that. So one of the teaching sessions was how to make the best website for a photographer. I failed that assignment. I don't have a website.
All right, I have a couple of questions. Part of the presentation, you talked about the LGBTQ people that you mentioned, like on one hand, like some of the guys were hiding their faces and so on. And then on the other hand, you talked about when they went out in the streets dressed as women, they were very highly respected. So that seems kind of contradictory that on one hand they're afraid to show, but on the other hand they're respected by the community. So can you give a little bit of insight into that?
It's very hard to understand in India, but to come out as a young male who's gay does not seem to be accepted in Jodhpur. So those were all teenagers that were working or at university, or they were sort of between the ages of 14 to 19, and they were coming into the Sambhali Trust as a safe space. If you're brave enough to come out, you generally, it seems to be in Jodhpur, you have to dress as a woman and then you go and live in the transgender house. And a lot of them have gender reassignment surgery to make sure that they get status as a transgender. And then, I don't understand it, I can't say I'm an expert on this, but then the respect level goes up and transgender women who are men living as women get more respect in society. And you see that in the streets. So there's a real dichotomy, very interesting. And actually Lulu's story, my roommate, was on a boy that was coming out. That's her story, very interesting. And how his brother hates him for it, and how his mother is beginning to accept it, but it's very difficult to come out.
I noticed you switched between black and white and color, and what was your thinking in terms of switching, or why were you taking some in black and white and some in color? And what did the instructors tell you about that,
So in the course, you were always able to do whatever you wanted without any guidance or criticism. They'd look at your light and they'd look at the structure of your photograph and critique it, but you could do what you like. And we were encouraged to try and find our style. And I thought my style was black and white. It's what I always did black and white until we moved to Trinidad. And then the color here is so deep and enticing and you can't go to the Blue Devils in Paramin and take everything in black and white. Well, Abigail, maybe you can, I don't know. I love some of the portraits in black and white. So I was just practicing with both. I think I like them both. But I think my style now is more color, probably.
So I noticed that, like you mentioned about when you went into the first place, they sent you kind of out in the wild with no translator. Was that part of the training? I mean, was that to kind of see how you react, how you could find the story on your own?
Yeah, I realized afterwards it was all pre-planned. Well, I think so, actually. I don't know. But I suspect it was pre-planned. And we ended up sitting on the floor with the kids for an hour watching them be taught. And then they'd start to interact with you. And then just by watching and listening, you'd figure out what you wanted to take pictures of. Yeah. It's hard to take it's okay taking pictures of kids because they're very open if they can't speak to you. It's very hard to take pictures of adults that are meaningful if you can't speak to them. That's what I found.
How would you, in terms of street photography, could you use a long zoom? And are you allowed to invade their privacy without permission, so to speak? I mean, obviously, if you're up close, they might say no, no, no. But if they don't know, where's the border line? Would you feel that you've crossed the line?
Yeah, we were asked not to use Zoom. Actually, I ended up mainly sort of 50 mil. You weren't supposed to be taking pictures of people without their permission. You could if you wanted just to check the scene and check your settings, but the whole point of the course was ethical storytelling, so you had to have someone's permission to take their images. And their permission wasn't, hello, I'm a photographer, can I take your image? It was often just, you know how you do when you're taking images, and particularly with the kids, you know, you could just tell. But yeah, I actually stopped taking, I had a slightly longer, and I just stopped taking it actually, it was a waste of time.
You used the prime lens only, is that it?
I was on 25 to 70 as
Okay,
Zoom,
so you used
but I
a short
noticed
zoom.
most of the time I was around about 50 mils.
Right.
And I've actually bought myself a new lens since I came back.
And a full frame camera or crop sensor?
Sorry?
Full frame camera or crop sensor?
I can't hear you.
Full frame or cropped sensor?
Full frame.
Hi.
Hi.
I thoroughly enjoyed your experience.
I'm going to move
It
nearer
was
so I can hear a little bit.
Oh,
That's okay.
I can speak louder. It's okay. Sit up. Sit. So I thoroughly enjoyed the entire experience. It wasn't just a presentation. I am not a photographer. I'm just the guest.
With Nelly.
So, but I noticed something when you were presenting in the beginning. Some of your pictures had a copyright symbol, or your signature, was it? How did you go about doing that, and what's the process involved?
Putting the little copyright stamp on the
Yeah,
bottom.
you just
I've actually
stamp-
stopped doing that. I used to do that on my images.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just have the copyright and the metadata. I realize that actually it ruins the image really if you put a copy. I just, you know, when I was growing up and becoming a photographer, I thought, yeah, it's good to
Yeah,
put your copyright on.
I did the
And-
same thing.
Yeah, and you can do it quite easily in most, I think Lightroom will do your copyright stamp for you.
But I thought, well, I stopped doing it also because I thought there was a process. Somebody along the lines told me that you were supposed to do something legally in order to.
I noticed during the course that half of us do. I mean, Holly, all her images had her copyright stamped on the image. And after a while, I do see what people say. It's a little bit distracting when you're looking at the image.
Yes. But this is a very beautiful picture. This one speaks to me, and the one with the old lady in.
She was interesting, yeah.
Going once, going twice. Uh-huh. Real.
I just want to tell Kathy, I loved your presentation as well. It was excellent.
Thank you.
There was one picture where you were showing all the rubbish on the ground when you were talking about, and that's the thing. I mean, our experience in India is not just the sights, but it was full of smells and sounds and chaos. And some of your pictures were taking me back. You could almost, yeah, there it is. That does remind me of some of our experiences. But I loved it. And a little tip for anybody who has blue eyes, what I did when everybody was trying to take pictures of Gail, I said, 20 rupees, please. And they would all give me this silly little giggle. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And it just evaporated. So a little tip.
Because it's overwhelming. Yeah.
All right, so we'll close off the formal part of tonight's session. Kathy, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your story and the journey, and I mean, a lot of the pictures are quite, I'm jealous of some of them. I mean, and it's, so I'm very happy. I know, when you were, when you were on the executive, I don't think you ever presented any works. It's been a long time coming, and
10 years.
The wait was worth it, I think. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Thank you to everyone for coming out. Yeah.